a lot of founders, unless your differentiator, unless your 10x skill is supply chain or operations or logistics, I think you should look sooner than not. Because again, a lot of these founders, what they're great at is the vision of the product development, the marketing side of it. Maybe it's the microphone that they have through certain channels. Like, maximize that. Don't force yourself to necessarily become an operations expert.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Today I'm pleased to be joined by Casey Armstrong, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at ShipBob, which is a 3PL and logistics company. So not everyone lives and breathes e-commerce and logistics and 3PLs and 4PLs. So for those people who don't understand that ecosystem, why don't you explain what ShipBob does?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here. And yeah, so ShipBob, we are building a global fulfillment platform. And so what does that mean? We want to be able to support brands, whether they're selling direct to consumer or selling B2B, and take the physical supply chain side and make it as easy as it is how they manage their data for the digital side. And so you can essentially send us your inventory, and whether you want to sell that in the United States or around the world, or you want to sell directly to your website or through a certain marketplace or a retail partner, we can fulfill the goods on your behalf. That way, these different brands can focus on what they often do best, which is marketing and sales and product development and community development, and they can leave the operation side of the business to us.
So are they often sort of shipping straight from the factory to you and sometimes to themselves as well? Or are they also shipping to Amazon, for example, and sort of you're one of the tentacles that they're shipping to straight from the factory?
For a vast majority of our customers, we will fulfill all of their orders and they will never even touch the goods. And so directly from their manufacturer, they will ship to us. They'll send it to one facility. Maybe they'll send it to one facility and we'll distribute it on their behalf, or they'll send it to multiple facilities. Maybe it's only in the US, maybe it's on a global scale. But yes, they never have to really touch the goods. A story that I look fondly back on. I won't name the brand yet because some of our customers, we have NDAs and some I can talk about rather freely. But this rather large, fast-growing company in the health and wellness space, they should do about 60 million in revenue this year. I think they've got a team of 22 or something. It's pretty crazy, the efficiency that they've been able to scale with. But I met with their two founders in the middle of last year. So they were, about half the size. And I met with them in one of our Southern California fulfillment centers, and they were so happy to be there. And they were walking in, and they do a lot of work on TikTok and Instagram, and so we're getting some good video, and they're like, we've never seen more than 5 of our items, and I'm like, what do you mean, 5 pallets? And they're like, huh, what's a pallet? They're like, no, 5 items, and they they've got their protein powders and whatnot, and I'm like, 5 items. And they're like, yeah, just because we've worked with you guys for so long. And so we come in and they've got an entire row of our fulfillment center dedicated strictly to them. They're doing a ton of volume and they're across multiple facilities of us, but it was like kids in a candy store where they're just picking up all their goods and they were so happy to see so much of their stuff. And so, yeah, anyways, even these brands that are scaling to tens of millions of revenue, they don't really ever have to touch their inventory if they don't want.
That's cool. I do have a follow-up question because it just sort of struck me because you guys have a lot of different fulfillment centers, but yet because you get the shipments directly from the manufacturer, and often the brand didn't even touch it or take physical possession. Are you then deciding how to split that up across your fulfillment centers? Do you decide, it should just be in 2, we'll do an East Coast or West Coast, or no, this is high enough volume, we should actually spread it out more?
So from before customers even start with us, we work with them on what is best for their business. And so some companies, they're smaller or for a handful of reasons, and they just want to be in one facility. Some people, for different reasons are like, well, I live in insert city and I want it to be located close to me. And we'll talk them through the pros and cons of that, of the fact that they're never going to touch the goods anyways. And so it doesn't really matter. And then some people want to distribute it based off of, what we do ask for is, can you send us your order history data? And
Right.
so from that, we plug it into what we call our time in transit analysis. And we come back to them and so we say based off, X number of fulfillment centers or a range, like here are the regions or the locations where we suggest that you place your inventory. And sometimes they say, awesome, take care of it on our behalf. And sometimes they want to be able to place the goods based off of the data, or they say, hey, I don't really deal with the complexity of 4 fulfillment centers. Let's start with 2. And so again, it depends, but we rely on a data-driven approach from the start. And then within ShipBob, in the analytics reporting tool, which you have access in the dashboard, you can easily at any point toggle on and off of adding or reducing fulfillment centers and see what that impact will be, and for time in transit, for your fulfillment costs and all of that. So you can continue to like optimize your logistics, for your brand as it evolves.
That's cool. Certainly even pre-pandemic, there was like this explosion of DTC brands, many of which started in like garages and basements, or maybe they had a retail store and then that retail store was like their first outpost of that brand, but then they all of a sudden went digital. And so at what point should these sort of newer startups that are, their garages are starting to burst or their basements are bursting, like at what time should they think, oh boy, I should really start thinking about a 3PL? And probably they shouldn't wait until it's too late, because then it's really tough and they'll want to make a decision in a rush. So is there any guideline as to sort of when they should start to think about, all right, I got to get Casey's team on the phone?
I mean, you nailed it with don't wait until it's too late. And so the way every business can deal with, the fun of logistics differently.
Mhm.
The way I often talk to brands about it is when you start feeling some of the pain on fulfillment is when you should start looking at. I don't think it's a bad thing for brands to fulfill themselves at the beginning, because you understand the process of what does it take to receive the goods. When I'm getting orders in, how am I going to pick these orders? How am I going to pack these orders? How am I going to pick which carrier, which label to put on? How often do I need to go to the post office or, to FedEx or wherever you're shipping out from? And you can kind of like just feel and understand that part of the supply chain a little bit closer. And I think that helps you when you do pick a solution like ShipBob or somebody else, understand, okay, this is why they're overemphasizing that they need to receive the goods in a certain way, because then that will allow them to stow the goods faster and cleaner, and they're able to pick and pack more efficiently and with extremely high accuracy rates. And so that's where, again, I think having that hands-on experience is really helpful. But a lot of founders, unless your differentiator, unless your 10x skill is supply chain or operations or logistics, I think you should look sooner than not. Because again, a lot of these founders, what they're great at is the vision of the product development, the marketing side of it. Maybe it's the microphone that they have through certain channels. Like, maximize that. Don't force yourself to like necessarily become an operations expert. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. A related question is, I've noticed that like across the 3PL ecosystem, the beginnings and ends of sort of where the services start and end, there's like some fuzziness there, right? So it's not that they all go by the exact same definition, much like, a CRM system. Some people will be like, no, that's Salesforce automation. No, that's CRM. No, that's a CDP. There's some overlap in the definitions. So, where do you think the beginning and end of sort of 3PL starts and ends? Because there's integration related things, there's flexibility in who the shipper is, there's all sorts of nuances to what is in fact 3PL.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's always evolving, and it's evolving for us at ShipBob. And so historically, where we came in was once the items hit our receiving dock doors. And then we took care of everything within the fulfillment center, again, from receiving it to stowing it to picking and packing. And we're pushing all of that to the merchant-facing application so they can see what's happening. We use our warehouse management system, or WMS, to power all of our facilities. So, and then we do everything, including choosing the carrier and the shipping method, which, we work out in advance with the customers, but we're using our ShipBob algorithm to pick who the best carrier would be based off of what their needs are. And then we hand things off to the carrier. So again, it's everything that happens in the fulfillment center. We started through initiatives that we've rolled out and through different partnerships going higher up in the supply chain. And so now we can help with things like ocean freight. We're not necessarily doing the ocean freight, but we will work closely with partners of ours like Flexport to make sure that that's you're able to ship us your inventory from, let's say, overseas very quickly, cost effectively, and with full transparency, just like what we try to do with our fulfillment. And so and then we continue to get deeper and deeper into middle mile and the international shipping side of the business as well. But still a lot of the core focus is what happens within the four walls. And then from a technology standpoint, we want to set it up so technology is never a blocker in how you want to run your business. And so we have our app store. We integrate with about 50 plus apps today. We're adding more every quarter, but then also we have our API, because if you're like, well, I want to use this ERP that nobody's ever heard of, and they want to build in their own custom integration, if they have their own custom e-commerce platform or way that they want to ingest data or pass it from one solution to the next, that's a possibility as well. And so that's, something that I love to dig into with our customers is how we're utilizing our API in ways that we didn't even think was possible or ways that we weren't even considering. And those are things that we can start to build deeper into the product, to allow not just one customer, but all of our customers benefit from, those capabilities.
Yeah, you mentioned international shipping, which dovetails perfectly into my next question, which is, the supply chain issues over the last year have really called into question an area that used to be super hot, which was, it used to be like, oh, everybody wanted just-in-time inventory, right? So they just wanted to keep the turn rate in their warehouse as low as possible so they didn't have carrying costs on it. They were like, oh, it's okay. I don't need that much of stuff in my warehouse. I can just make sure that it's on the way to me, and that's all I need to worry about. And of course, with the supply chain disruption, all the way from the factory, including shipping and everything in between, all of a sudden, the folks who were running just-in-time inventory during the pandemic, well, they were out in like a month of stuff, right? Whereas the folks who are like old school, like, oh yeah, I got 3 warehouses full, they were the ones who like crushed it because they were the only ones with stuff. And so so given the new ecosystem, yeah, how many months of inventory should a person have, assuming that they're not on like a hyper growth path, right? And it's not a huge seasonal product. Is there a guideline? Do you guys help with them figuring out like when to put the PO in at the factory so that they should make sure that they, it's not there too long, but they don't run out, that kind of thing?
It depends on the time of the year. And so we actually recently published our inventory turnover benchmark report to look at across all of our customers, what's the average turnover rate?
Right.
And because there isn't some one size fits all. And
okay,
am I a 1 SKU business? Am I a 10,000 SKU business? Like it really depends. And you nailed it, where pre-COVID it was a lot of just in time, and then some of the stories we heard about how people were navigating getting certain certain items during COVID was just insane, and that's one of the reasons. And then with the freight congestion issues, that was the catalyst for us to launch FreightBob and work closely with Flexport, which is how can we find certain freight providers that were coming from China or elsewhere and get inventory over through the port of LA and Long Beach into our facilities so that we could get into the final fulfillment center destination, honestly, within 3 weeks. And so that was our goal. And so we often get things from China into our SoCal facility where we break things up and distribute it in 15 days, which is insanely fast, where it was taking some people like months and months. And so that way they can still operate with some of this just-in-time mindset, even if they might be ordering more goods. And so again, how are you ordering goods heading into the summer months? And it also depends on the industry, but how are you ordering goods heading into the summer months, where it's often slower, versus how are you ordering goods when you're heading into the holidays, where you might do 35 to 40% of your total orders, and then you're heading into the new year, and then there's Chinese New Year.
Yeah, so it seems like there's no one size fits all, but with the right data, you can make intelligent choices, which is key. One other area, obviously, that's different depending on the brand and depending on the product is, special needs. And some special needs might be climate controlled warehouses. Obviously, food is the most likely to expire, but then even outside of food, you mentioned a protein powder company. I don't know what the shelf life is on their protein powder, but do they need refrigerated warehouses and climate controlled warehouses? And has that become sort of an additional overlay onto the 3PL industry?
To the broader industry, yes. For us, we try to think of how can we say yes to as much as possible across our entire network. And so the value that we bring to our software and to our operations, it's not just applicable to one specific customer, but it's something we can roll out to all of our customers, whether they're doing, their first sale ever online or they're, sending their millionth order with us. Which is awesome to see now that we've been around for the time that we have. We have customers where we've literally fulfilled over 1 million orders for them. So it's pretty cool to see that kind of stuff. And so, for us, there are, like you mentioned, the protein powders. You're right. We need lot control. And so how do we have lot control within the operation side? How do we have lot control and everything from a tracking perspective within the software as well? Currently, we don't ship perishables and have, cold goods. We don't ship oversized and heavyweight. Like if you wanted to, ship a mattress or something, we might not be your best solution, but we try to open up pretty much everything else in the fat middle so that we can support, as many brands as possible with what they need.
Cool. Well, you've probably seen your customers or prospects make a bunch of mistakes over the years because you've been around a while. So what are some common mistakes that they make before they pick a 3PL? And are there other mistakes that they make after they pick somebody, even yourselves, where they don't execute properly?
We kind of touched on this a little earlier, where I honestly have seen this less. I feel, if we're going to try to find the pros of COVID, and for our business in particular, it's the magnifying glass and the acceleration of education in the greater supply chain and logistics world. And so I feel like the customers that we talk to today, even if they're just getting started, the questions they ask and how advanced they are in their thought process is honestly so much further along than it was, back in, let's say, 2019. But so again, I don't hear this as much, but sometimes people are like, well, I live in Austin, so I want my inventory in Dallas. And because that's where your closest facility is. And maybe that actually makes sense because it's centrally located. But then we'd hear the same thing where it'd be like, hey, I'm in San Diego, I want my inventory here. I'm like, well, 45% of your orders are shipped in the greater Northeast and the New York, Massachusetts area. Why don't we split the inventory across multiple facilities? And they're like, no, I want it in Southern California. And so being able to drive to the facility is, if you're picking the right partner, that shouldn't be necessarily part of the equation. What you want is you want your goods as close to the highest concentration of the end consumer as possible, because that way you can ship it faster and cheaper. And so that's one thing I think that people should think through. After they pick a solution, no matter who it is, and especially heading into peak season, is how you send in your goods is extremely important. And so the more you can do from letting your partner know, hey, this is what you're going to receive, this is when you're going to receive it, if things can be, depending on what the items are, if they can be barcoded or maybe bagged. But the cleaner you can ship your items to your fulfillment partner, the cleaner the entire process is. And so that's something that I can never emphasize enough.
Yeah, you mentioned, bagging items and obviously barcoding things, but that got my brain thinking down the sort of a branding related question, which is for certain types of products, unboxing is a really important touch point for their brand, right? And for other product types, unboxing is it's a complete non-entity. You just don't even think about the box at all. It's just the thing that carries the stuff you want. And so, but yet I find some categories where unboxing is a branding opportunity, it's completely missed by the marketer, by the brand. They completely ignored, any kind of a creation of warm fuzzies as a result of the unboxing experience. Have you guys had any sort of interesting stories where you've seen the way that a particular product arrives for you to get fulfilled, and you're like, wow, that was like, they really did a great job with that. Like, I would be excited to open this box.
A lot. And so I'm glad you asked that, because something that we talk to our customers about a lot is, where do you get 100% open rate? That's in the items that you ship.
Yeah.
And so, especially as more brands come online and the competition for eyeballs becomes harder, and so these channels get more saturated, you really need to knock out that post-purchase experience. And so, out of, three big bets I'll call out that we've been focusing a lot as we invest into our product and engineering and operations is customization, which I'll dive into that because that's what you're asking about. International, and that's not just shipping globally, but opening up global facilities, because we've got them in Canada and the UK and Australia and Europe, and then omni-selling. And so that could be shipping it to different retailers. That could be shipping it through the retailers.com site, like a target.com, or that could be through marketplaces like an Amazon or an eBay, or through some of the social media platforms. But on the customization side, you're right, is this is where the marketers can have more fun, but they also need to talk to operations to understand what's feasible. And so making sure that they've got these custom boxes, and I'll get back to that in a second. But then what about marketing inserts, and can we add custom gift notes? Or an area that we've invested in a lot is our custom rules engine, where maybe on the first order you get this insert, on the second order you get that insert, and on the third order you get some other gift. And so it's being thoughtful about that. So with the custom boxes, something that I want to call out there is really two things. One is being thoughtful of like the size of the boxes, because how your shipping costs are often calculated. And this is where you can go to your operations team and they'll like you a lot better and be thankful that you're asking them these questions as the marketer, which is often my position, is what's the dimensions of the boxes? Because the way the shipping costs are calculated, it's dimensional weight and then the zones that it travels. And the zones that it travels is essentially how far it's going. And then the dimensional weight looks into the height, width, and length of the package along with the weight of the good. And so making sure that, hey, you don't build this pretty box and now your dimensional weight is all of a sudden that much greater. And so now your shipping cost is now, 80 cents more expensive per package. And, you're shipping 10,000 packages a month. And all of a sudden that's an extra $8,000 that you guys are, spending in addition. And so that's one, is thinking about the size of the package. And then also making it so it not only fits your goods, but it can be packaged as easily as possible. Because sometimes we've worked with customers where we post some of them online, like Pet Lab and Chacho Macho. They have these beautiful boxes and they're very thoughtful of how can we make this box fold up as easily as possible. There's some people we've worked with where initially they want this awesome box and it requires so many different touches and intricacies, and it just gets really expensive. And so what you want is this awesome, amazing unboxing experience that people will post on TikTok and Instagram. What you don't want is to turn into this massive cost center where you're just hemorrhaging cash in for the name of like a pretty unboxing experience. And so I think it's important to be thoughtful about that.
Have a lot of brands also been sort of taking into account sort of an eco-centric mindset with regards to boxing materials that they might not have thought about in the past, and perhaps even trading off a little bit more dimensional weight if we use a greener, cushioning or things like that?
Yeah, we've definitely seen that pick up a lot. And we really saw that pick up a lot during COVID. And we've invested in that as well to make sure that our fulfillment network is carbon neutral, offering carbon neutral options for our customers with different integrations so that the last mile is carbon neutral. And then definitely on the eco-friendly packaging, whether they be poly mailers or boxes. And we've got partners that we refer people to, all the time. I sent one earlier this morning about that, where it's, hey, we want this custom unboxing experience, but we want to take, the eco-friendly approach. And so how can we find that where it's still more or less like cost neutral, but we're taking the environment into consideration as well. So yeah, that's been a great trend that we've seen pick up, especially in the last 3 years.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Certainly DTC brands seem to have an ongoing tension with Amazon, right? Almost a love-hate relationship. Others think that FBA and all of the flavors of Amazon, whether they're mostly moving away from FBM, but they don't all that is like the best thing since sliced bread. Marketplaces are the best thing since sliced bread, and probably the reality is somewhere in the middle. I mean, obviously, you probably have a slightly biased opinion on it, but what is your thought about Amazon and FBA and how it coexists with folks doing 3PL?
So with e-commerce brands, first and foremost, they want to make sure that they are taking care of their customers, and then they want to make sure that they're building a strong, long-term, capital efficient business. And so nobody can refute that Amazon is a massive marketplace that can draw potentially a lot of eyeballs and customers for, a large percentage of brands. And so I think most brands should evaluate that as an opportunity and understand, when in their journey does that happen? Does that happen on day one? Does it happen in year one? Does it happen on year 10? That's kind of TBD. But, Amazon's a great partner, obviously, for so many brands. And so I think, most should look into that and just evaluate what those economics look like. And sometimes that can be a way for them to pull people directly to their website as well. So I think people should definitely look into that.
Great. Well, we're coming up at the the peak season for 2022, and I'm sure your teams will be working if such a thing exists, quadruple shifts to try to get all the shipping out for your clients. But 2023 has sort of a big question mark associated with it. Some people are afraid we'll have a recession, hopefully not a third world war. And then other folks are still super, super bullish about it. What has you excited about 2023?
Well, looking at what we have in front of us today, so starting pre-COVID, usually saw peak season mid-November. With COVID, it was pretty much peak season the whole year. Last year, we saw peak season kind of get pulled into October, and this year we're seeing the same. And so right now we're seeing volume trend above our forecast. And so even with a lot of the macro headwinds, some of which you outlined already, consumers are still buying. And some brands, of course, are having tougher times than others, but there's still a lot of demand. And so I think as we think of how small e-commerce penetration still is today, how it provides such a convenient service for so many different brands, and also in areas where we've invested, which is not just direct to consumer, but B2B, both through direct, fulfilling to different retailers, but also fulfilling through the retailers' websites, and also going global. It's really unlocked so much expansion opportunity for different brands. And so that's what has me so bullish, is that these brands, they're not just going to roll over. Like, these are entrepreneurs. They're not going to quit. And so what they're going to do is they're going to find arbitrage opportunities or new ways to continue to build and grow a real business. And being able to use our entrepreneurial mindset blended with theirs to really unlock so much future growth. Are things going to be tougher next year? Maybe. But, I think people they have the grit to fight through whatever headwinds there are. And then hopefully as things ease up a little bit, whenever that may be, things will just start to take off again.
Yeah, I would agree, because for those brands who want to be aggressive, if some of their competition take their foot off the gas, if demand goes down 10%, but some of the brands drop their marketing by 25%, that means the remaining brands can actually capture share. So maybe actually the perfect time for some brands to take advantage of what might seem like a soft market, at the macro level, but might not be for them.
Exactly.
Cool. Thanks so much for joining me, Casey. It's been a pleasure chatting about the evolution of e-commerce and not the last mile, but that in-between portion, right, between the manufacturer but at the time that it gets shipped out, and understand how that's evolving. It's been great to learn about what you guys are up to.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.